بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Continuing in our series on the Fiqh of marriage, a concise summary. We stopped last week in 3.5 in the discussion of the marriage meeting, where we spoke about the objectives of such a meeting, i.e. for proposal, what can be seen from the spouse, the objectives of such a meeting, and also things like offering gifts, etc. So we'll continue on this point about the fiqh related to the proposal until we finish, inshallah, this process. So here, we need to now move to 3.5 and talk about what is the ruling on having an actual marriage meeting. Yani, sitting together with the potential, means the male and the female, the suitor and the one sought, i.e. the man and the woman, sitting together in the presence of the mahram and speaking. What is the ruling on such a gathering? And this is something which we have to understand from the beginning, before we get into some of the rules, or more of the rules. And this is because some of the ulama, interestingly, they held the view that there is no such thing as a marriage meeting. Yani it's only seeing. That's all that the Sharia permitted. So some of the scholars, not all of them, but some of them, they mention that the idea of meeting and speaking and talking with the potential husband or wife, the suitor and the woman, this in reality isn't something which is legislated or is known or is clear on what's intended. For example, Shaykh Abdul Abbad, Hafidhullah Ta'ala, he was asked, is it permissible for the one looking into marrying a woman that he sit down with her and get to know her in terms of him asking her about her characteristics, her interests and likes, and other than that, which is connected to her personality, with the claim of getting to fully know her before proceeding to marriage. And this sitting is obviously in the presence of her father or brother. And the Shaykh Hafidhullah said that which is apparent is that there is some spaciousness, i.e. in this idea of sitting with her, looking at her. He said, sitting and looking. He said this is not necessary. As for him just asking her and posing some questions, and it's not really clear what's intended by that. And the Shaykh's view here is Sharh Sunnah Abi Dawud, hadith number 19. What seems to be apparent from the Shaykh's answer here is that the idea of a marriage meeting, sitting and talking, even in the presence of the mahram, it's not really clear what's intended, because looking is what the Sharia has come with. And this is made more clear by some of the fatwa of Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen, rahimahullah. In more than one fatwa, he was asked about this issue. He says, as for sitting with her, i.e. the suitor, the man who's coming to propose, sitting with her, i.e. the woman, and speaking, that is not allowed, because there is no need for that, because this motivates, because there's no need for it, or no need that encourages such an action. There's no need that encourages or necessitates such an action. This is found على Darb, tape number 31, side A. In another fatwa on his website, the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, the woman who is proposed to is like the woman who is not proposed to, in terms of looking at her, speaking with her, sitting with her. That is, it is haram upon a person, i.e. a man, except for the act of looking, without seclusion. If he wants to propose to her, means the Shaykh saying here that it's what is like this woman who is proposing to, her ruling is like any other woman he does not propose to. She's a stranger to him. So looking at her, sitting with her, speaking with her, all that is haram except for looking, because Sharia allowed looking without seclusion, khalwa. And the Shaykh says if a man wants to enjoy the company or sitting with the woman who he's hoping to propose to or speak to, then let him conduct the marriage contract. So interestingly, the Shaykh held the view that the idea of a sitting where you talk freely and ask questions, this it didn't come in the nusus, it didn't come in the texts, because Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam told the Sahaba to go and look However, Shaykh Ibn Baz, rahimahullah, he held the view that he said in his fatwa on his website, there's no harm. There is no harm that you sit in front of the suitor, i.e. the woman, until you see him or he sees her, as long as there's no seclusion. This is with her father, in the presence of her father or her brother or with another woman or like a mother and the likes. There is no, as long as there's no khalwa with her, because the Prophet ﷺ said to the one who's proposing, go and look at her. And he said, if any one of you proposes to a woman, then if he's able to see what will invite him to marry her, then let him do so. The intent is that if it is easy for him to look at her, then this is appropriate, and because it is closer or more likely to lead into love between them, and more likely to lead to an engagement and marriage. However, it is not allowed for him to be alone with her, rather he sees her in the presence of other than her, like her father and the likes. So from this, wallahu ta'ala alam, becomes clear that if the person, the man, coming to the house or the gathering or wherever they're going to meet, provided the mahram is there, and he's going to, with the intention of seeing her, and then asking some questions, i.e. to find out more about her deen, her khuluq, and etc., then inshallah there's no harm in that based on the fatwa of the shaykh. And this is because in reality, this kind of gathering of seeing and sitting and speaking, they all come together. And the reality is that if it's done without excess, inshallah, is not prohibited. Right? Because the scholars allow that a man and woman speak for the purpose of the marriage and to find out some details about one another before proceeding. So, but just to mention that point, that some of the scholars, they held the view that it's not necessary. And this probably is in light of the practices nowadays where people have gone to extreme lengths of just freely sitting together under the pretext of marriage, and there's no hudud wala quyud, no restrictions and no foundation, barriers, just sitting and talking freely, and we'll get to that in a minute. طيب, so if the marriage meeting is permissible, point number, so this will be 3.6 now. Who needs to be part of this meeting, right, in order for it to be done? Because once we understand that inshallah it is permissible to have one with conditions, who is part of this meeting? And this is important because at the end of the day you have to know who's participating, and obviously who's participating and what's the conditions. Now, so first we need to know there are three major parties that are needed. Number one, the man who's proposing, so the suitor. Number two, the woman who's been proposed to, the makhtoba, so the khatib, the one who's proposing. The makhtoba, the one who has been proposed for or to, so the woman. And thirdly, the wali. Right, the wali here is the guardian, or it could be a mahram. Right, in the case the wali is not present, but a mahram is there, like her brother, or her uncle and the likes. The ulama usually, when they mention the term mahram and wali, they're talking about the males in the family because they're the ones who take the maqam, the position of a wali. In terms of female maharim, the female relatives, like her sister and likes, then if they sit, then the idea of khalwa can be removed. But the idea is they're not responsible for the marrying off of her, so they're not the ones who should be or not necessary, I should say, in the meeting, in the way that the wali is, because his job is to vet this man and to ask questions and to be there to protect the interests, as we mentioned the hikmah behind the wali before. And also, this is why the wali is important as a necessity for the marriage. However, so these three are there. Suitor is needed, right? The man, the woman, and the wali. However, it is not allowed for them, i.e. the suitor and the woman, the man and the woman, to be secluded, to have khalwa. And this is because Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam prohibited khalwa, and the hadith have come. Khalwa here means seclusion. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said in Hadith Umar, لا يخلون الرجل بامرأة إلا كان ثالثهما الشيطان. That whenever a man and a woman are alone, the third of them is shaitan. Hadith in Tirmidhi, hadith is Sahih Tirmidhi 2165. Added to this, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said another hadith Muslim, no man should be alone with a woman except in presence of her mahram. Hadith number 1341, hadith Sahih Muslim. So here we see that the idea of khalwa, seclusion, is not permissible. لا يخلون رجل بامرأة إلا ومعها ذو محرم. That a man should not be alone with a woman except in the presence of her mahram. And obviously the ulama, they debated, right, how many or who can take away the seclusion and the likes. But obviously the key is that provided the mahram is there, and more specifically the wali or whoever can take his place, this will be the most ideal situation. If other members of the family are there, then provided the wali or the guardian or the male who can help with the process is there, then inshallah there is no harm in it. But the idea is no seclusion. It's very important. Islam is not allowed even in the pretext, even in the context of a marriage contract. Khalwa is haram. It's haram to have khalwa, seclusion. Now the scholars, they discuss, and the question should come up, what exactly constitutes khalwa? What exactly constitutes khalwa? What does it mean to be in seclusion? And this is something that people ask. What is khalwa? Does it mean that no one can see them? Does it mean that no one can hear them? Does it mean that you can see and hear them? Does it mean, for example, they're in one part of the house and the wali and the family is in another part of the house? Like this, what's the ulama or scholars telling us? So here we need to read first the definition of khalwa. It comes in the al-Mawsu'a al-Fiqhiyya al-Kuwaitiyya, in the Encyclopedia Fiqh, the Kuwaiti Encyclopedia Fiqh. There's a section on khalwa, volume number 19, page 276. Volume 19, page 276. It states, it is not allowed to be secluded with a strange woman, i.e. a man with a woman who, when we say strange, ajnabiyya means a woman who's not his mahram, is not blood relative, or someone who is married to, like a wife, or like is not. So that's what's meant by strange. It is not allowed to be secluded, i.e. for a man to be secluded with a strange woman, even at work. And the intent of seclusion, khalwa, that is prohibited is that a woman is with a man. Now here's the ta'rif, the definition. It is that a woman is with a man in a place which they are both safe from a third person entering upon them. Okay, so repeat. It's when a man and a woman are in a place in which they are safe from a third person entering upon them. So they're in a place where they're alone. And they're in a place where they're safe, such that they know another person is not going to enter upon them. So they're away from the people. Then they continue, right? The authors and the collectors of the Mawsu'a, the encyclopedia, they continue until they say the following. From what is permissible also is seclusion in the meaning that a man and woman may be alone while still in front of people. That is, that their bodies are not physically screened from the people, but the people cannot listen to their speech. So interestingly, the Mawsu'a says it's mubah, it's permissible, that the man and the woman be in the presence of others, so they can see them, but they can't hear what they're saying. And they bring the proof, Hadith Sahih al-Bukhari, that an Ansari woman, radiyallahu ta'ala anha, came to the Prophet ﷺ and became secluded with him. She became secluded in what? In speech. So she's in front of the people, but she went and she told Nabi something that other people can't hear. Hafiz ibn Hajar mentions, and the Bukhari has a chapter title, chapter, what has come regarding a man being alone with a woman in front of the people. Then Ibn Hajar says, rahimahullah, commenting, a man should not be secluded from her, such that they are both screened from the people. Screened from the people. Rather, in terms of the people not hearing their speech, if it is something which is feared, others hearing. So he says here, a man should not be secluded from her, such that they are both screened from the people. But it's allowed in terms of people not hearing their speech. And he says why? What's the reasoning? Well, the proof is here, it's hadith. But the reasoning is because there might be fear about what the woman is saying. I.e., it could be something the woman is asking the man which she is shy to mention among the people. So this is the end of the quote. So that's from Fath al-Bari. They cited it from Fath al-Bari. So what do we take from this? We conclude from this quote from Al-Mawsu' al-Fiqhiyya that khalwa is physically being secluded with a strange woman. As for being in the presence of people with a strange woman, but one cannot hear what the two are talking about, it's not technically khalwa according to the above definition. Because khalwa, we said, is for a man and woman to be physically secluded. But if they're present in front of people, but you can't hear what they're saying, it technically is not khalwa. However, is it still halal? That's the question. Now I will offer, inshallah, a nice categorization of this from the Shaykh Abdul al-Bassam. May Allah have mercy upon him, the student of Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen, and the author of the excellent explanation of Umdatul Ahkam and Bulugh al-Maram and other books. Allama Bassam, he writes, and he mentions a nice benefit that khalwa is of two types. So this is important because if we don't know what khalwa is, it could be that that a man and woman who want to get married, they could be doing things which are haram under the pretext of marriage. So it's important to know what khalwa is. Shaykh Bassam, who died 1423 Hijri, Shaykh Abdul Bassam, he says, rahimahullah, the khalwa is of two types. Number one, khalwa mughalladha, which is like mughalladha here means heavy, or so a heavy khalwa, or a severe form of seclusion. And this is when a man and a strange woman, or a woman and a strange man, those who are not maharim, are gathered in a place which they are safe from others entering upon them. This is called khalwa mughalladha. He calls it the heavier or the more severe type of khalwa. That a man and woman are secluded from the people. Literally, they can't see them and they're safe from the people entering upon them. Number two, khalwa mukhaffafa. Khalwa mukhaffafa is the light khalwa, the light version of seclusion, which a man and a strange woman gather in front of people, such that they are visible, but their speech is not heard. Wadah, you can see them, but you can't hear them. The Shaykh then finishes after he mentions this. Heavy and light khalwa are means to falling into what is haram, and the means take the rulings of their purposes. We already studied that, alhamdulillah, in Qawaid al-Fiqhiyya. Al-Wasa'il, the means, they have the hukum of what? The maqasid, of the purposes. So now this is important. So he's saying here, the heavy and light khalwa are both means to falling into what is haram. So he's not saying halal, the first one, the second one versus the first one. Both of them are wasa'il to the haram. First one is worse because they're physically, no one can see them, so they can, Allah anything can happen. And if you can't hear them, then it's possible they say things they're not supposed to be saying. He says, however, the situation may differ in accordance to their purpose, circumstances, and state of affairs. There could be times where these things could, like the khalwa, mukhaffafa, can be allowed, like we mentioned the proof above. And the other times, or in the cases that we know, the khalwa al-mughalladha, it's not allowed. Illa bid-darura. Illa bi-darura. Except by necessity. So for example, the Mawsu'a al-Fiqhiyya, they mentioned that sometimes khalwa can become wajib if it's a necessity. Some severe situation happen, a man won't have to be alone, like life or death or something along those lines. See, it's different. But what's the bottom line, Shaykh Bassam, what he's saying? Khalwa, mughalladha, wa khalwa, mukhaffafa. Both of them are means to the haram, therefore it shouldn't be done. And this is taken from his kitab, Tawdih al-Ahkam, Sharh Bulugh al-Maram, volume 5, page 600. It's an excellent book. That kitab, one of the excellent books on fiqh, by Shaykh Bassam, because he writes contemporary issues and he mentions great benefits. He's a student of Imam Sa'di, rahimahullah, a long-time student of his. So therefore, from this we conclude that khalwa should be avoided. The man, the wife, the suitor, the khatib and the makhtuba, they should not be in seclusion. They should not be in seclusion, whether they be in a part of the house and the wedding can't see them, or they're in front of everybody but they're chit-chatting quietly and no one knows what they're saying. This is not befitting. Especially because the job of the wedding is to have the best interest of the woman, his daughter or whoever he's wali for, and it will not be achieved the purpose if he can't hear what's being said. So this is the more safer, correct way. طيب. So now that we understand this, we move to 3.7, which is when the marriage meeting is conducted, what exactly should be asked? What questions should be brought forth? And before I get there, Shaykh Ibn Baz rahimahullah, in one of his fatwas or questions and answers, he was asked about the Islamic etiquette for proposing, and he mentioned some advice which is similar to what we already been mentioning. But the point he's mentioning, obviously, here the Islamic etiquette. That there's such thing as Islamic etiquette for the proposal. So that's a fatwa that perhaps we can share another time. طيب, going now to 3.7. Questions to ask and how to get to know the potential. This is probably the most important and most question or most often asked about question. How do I know the person I'm marrying is the right person? What can I ask? Etc., etc. So in the marriage meeting, it is permissible for the man and woman to speak and ask important questions that they want answers to. Shaykh Ibn Baz rahimahullah mentioned some examples of what can be asked. Before we get there, it's very important to know that when it comes to conversation here, both of these people are strangers to one another. So they're coming to meet one another in order to see if they're suitable to get married. And obviously we mentioned before compatibility. So if the person follows the steps that we're mentioning so far, then they would have already knocked on the door of a person who they're pleased with their appearance or what they heard about their looks, then pleased with their religion, and now is coming to check, to verify that which they heard, and also to then later on find more information about their character and deen. Everyone understanding this? It's not a hit or miss idea. You just come randomly. You already came to someone who you heard or you saw them from before. It's very important, brothers and sisters, to understand this, because the process here that Islam is teaching us is guided. It has much benefit. First, you're coming to someone who you've already seen or you heard good about their description or appearance when you're pleased with. And two, that their deen is pleasing to you from that which you hear. The meeting is to see one another, to verify that, if you haven't already seen, or to verify their deen and their character. And then after the meeting, you do more of that. So it's not just the meeting and that's it. And this is why many people, they get into some problems perhaps, because they think it's at the meeting and that's it. So طيب, what are some examples of questions when your first meeting? Shaykh Ibn Baz rahimahullah on his fatwa, his website, he answered one fatwa and he mentioned questions a man can ask, such as, first of all, it should be questions related to the marriage. That's about the person and marriage. That's what you're asking. So you're not asking random questions that have nothing to do with the person and the potential for marriage. So this is important because you're still strangers, so you cannot be so free to ask anything. It has to be related to the zawaj. So questions like accommodation. Where do you want to live? How do you want to live? It's an important question. And obviously, it's better to ask those kind of questions in an open-ended way, so the person can express what they want. A yes or no type of question, close-ended, it's not the best because you're not going to get answers that are clear to you. So for example, you want to live in a city and the person says yes, it's not necessarily helpful. But maybe what's your ideal idea of where to live? Or where would you like to live? What do you expect, for example, as a good accommodation? And the man can ask the woman, for example, about her biography, her life, a little bit about her, who she is, what she likes to do. You can ask, another fatwa Shaykh Ibn Baz mentioned, the woman can ask the man about his job. What do you work? What's your profession, for example? And what do you do? Shaykh Al-Bani rahimahullah in Silsila Huda Nur, tape 13, side A, he mentions it's very important to ask about the deen. And this is unfortunately, many fathers, they don't do that. For example, they may ask questions, he said, and he complained. Some fathers, they only ask, he doesn't smoke? Does he commit zina? As if that's it. Is he drinks khamar? Those are major sins. You wouldn't come to the door of somebody who does those things, because that person is not ready to get married. They make tawbah, Allah. They need to make tawbah. So rather, you coming to someone, you're asking questions, obviously, about the prayer. Well, how do you pray? Or, who do you, do you study Islamic knowledge, for example? Obviously, you also want to make sure the person is upon the correct understanding of the deen, and that's obviously something you want to do beforehand. And then Shaykh, interestingly, he said that some fathers, they don't even ask if the suitor, does he go to the cinema or not? Look what he says, the Shaykh. He asked, they don't ask, does he go to the cinema, does he not go to the cinema? Does he watch movies? That's the question. Says it, no, tape 13, side A. Why? Because this shows you the level of religiosity of the person. And this is important to ask those kind of questions. Who is this person, right? So obviously, everyone is going to present themselves in the best way, but you also want to know in general, who are they? Who do you take knowledge from? What do you like to do in your free time? What are some of your expectations? Some questions are very important. And these important questions are asked. However, they could be related only to things that we said are related to the marriage. So questions right now we mentioned are like accommodation, work and employment. You can ask about somebody's pastimes and their recreation. You can ask questions about their life. Where did they study, or how did they grew up, a family, like that. Those kind of questions, expectations, what they expect, and of course later next week we'll talk about things like conditions, right? What kind of conditions they want for this, if it's going, things are gonna become clear, right? It's going to be like an agreement, an engagement, or acceptance, a proposal. You wanted also the expectations. Maybe someone has expectations they are asking, etc. So here the ulama, they don't mention lots of questions the person should be asking. They should keep the meeting focused to, number one, seeing the person, and we spoke about that before. So you want to see them enough that you have a clear picture of who they are, how they look, and also enough information from what they speak. You can judge how they're speaking, how they are, and what they prioritize. Nowadays, people, they may have gone to excess in this topic, asking 100 questions. Like, for example, people may ask 100 questionnaire or 100 question personality tests and the likes of this. And this is excessive, because this kind of meeting is essentially, it's not the only thing you're doing. You're going there primarily to follow the Sunnah of Rasul to see, and to get some clarity. It's the most important question. And the deen and khuluq, that's what you're looking for. For example, how do you expect or plan the family to be? For example, what's your ideal understanding of family, etc. Keep it focused. And the reality is both parties are going to answer in a way that obviously is to their best advantage. And I want to mention a point here. There's no need to be excessive in these questionings. As some of the ulama earlier said, they didn't even feel the need for this. And the reason why is because both parties, as we'll see coming soon, are not mahram. So it's very easy to go from questions to all kind of talk. On top of that, the reality is both parties, they're not going to rely just on what the person said to make the decision. Rather, they're going to do their homework. And this is very important, that the person, the man and the woman, both of them do their homework on each other. It's not sufficient just to say, well, they gave me a very good answer. Everyone's going to say Kitab wa Sunnah. Everyone's going to say good things. They want to look good. They're going to say things that are favorable to them. So in reality, how do you then know the person, what they're saying to you, is truly reliable information? Like, they might tell you, I pray salah in the masjid, and I read Quran, and I, mashallah, have a job and everything. And then the person's opposite of what you heard. A'udhu billah. So the question is that the ulama, they offer us other alternatives, or the post-meeting, right? Either after the meeting, ways to find out more about that person. And this is important because some people think that the meeting is sufficient alone to get everything that you need. It's not going to be. Because, as we'll see, Islamically, because the meeting is a haja, a need, it can only be done to what Islam allowed. You're not allowed to have liberties in that meeting. And maybe I should mention that point first before going to what I wanted to mention. So we'll go to 3.8 for a second, and I'll come back to this point. 3.8 is it permissible? What's the ruling on having repeated sit-downs and marriage meetings and seeing the man and a woman seeing one another? What's the ruling on repeated sit-downs and marriage meetings? Our ulama, they mention that it's only permissible for a man to go and to see the woman again, or a woman to see the man, vice versa, more than once, if there is a need, such as they did not get a good look at that individual in the beginning, the first time. Or in the first meeting, it did not become clear to them the character or the answer the person gave. Maybe it was short. Maybe the person, didn't say much because they were shy. So the person wants to come again with the permission of the wali and her to go and visit one more time. So making repetitions of this is only allowed for hajj. And this is found in Mughni ibn Qudama, volume 7, page 453, Al-Mughni al-Muhtaj ibn Hajar al-Haytami, volume 3, page 128, and also Al-Mawsu' al-Fiqhiyya Kuwaitiyya, volume 19, page 200 to 201. The reason why the ulama do not allow excessive looking and excessive meeting is because the objective of the first meeting, if it was achieved, and what's the objective again? To see that person, to talk to them about the important questions, and to get a general sense if they have a chemistry or some kind of attraction here. If it's there, khalas, they have what they need. It's not allowed them to do more. And this is important because the ulama, they mention that the man and the woman are strangers to one another. And if they're strangers to one another, it's not allowed to take liberties to sit together freely with strangers and just talking freely. Talking freely and just talking and sitting and enjoying their company. This is a mistake that happens quite often. You might find one person visiting every week, 10 times a month, sometimes months. What's the objective? The person has enough information to make a decision. What is holding them back? And that's why Shaykh Uthaymin held the view, as he said earlier, that if someone already wants to do more sittings, you just do the contract, marry her already. And this is the fatwa of Shaykh bin Baz rahimahullah on his website, official website. And Shaykh Albani rahimahullah also was against excessive looking. And it says Huda Nur, tape number 423. And I already mentioned the earlier sources from the different madhabs. And what's the logic behind this? It's important. Why did the ulama caution against excessive sit-downs and looking? Making nadar, looking at the strange woman, or the woman looking at a strange man, this nadar is for a hajj. So because it's haram to look at an opposite gender except for a need, in this case this need, we have to lower our gaze. The need was to find out if this person is suitable, compatible for marriage. Once the need is no longer there, the hukum goes back to the original ruling. That concession is gone and goes back to the original ruling of tahrim. Second, Shaykh Albani rahimahullah mentions to the questioner, in usul of fiqh we learn a principle, al-amr, a command. We know when there's a command, yufid al-wujub, it benefits us with obligation. However, when a benefit, it's very important in usul of fiqh, if Allah commands you something, does it necessitate repetition or only to do it once? The questioner said only once. Because we know in Islam when there's a command, it only means do the action. It doesn't say do it once, twice, thrice, unless the legislation says so. It's usul fiqh. So here we take a benefit. If Allah said make hajj, وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ حِجُّ الْبَيْتِ, upon the people is for them to make hajj to Allah, Kaaba, etc. That's one time in your life. The hadith, the Sahabi asked the question, and Rasulullah said, only once. But just the order itself, the command means once. It doesn't mean do hajj 10 times, just once. That's what's must. Beyond that, it's different. Same thing here. If there's a command to look, you only look. That's it. Once you finish looking, you're done. So the idea of looking again and again and again for no reason, sitting again and again without reason, is not allowed. And the reason why is that person is doing this extra sitting and looking for enjoyment. And this is not allowed. And I'll give you an example. Shaykh Albani rahimahullah, it's mentioned by one of his students in one of his books. The book is called Al-Mawsu'a al-Fiqhiyya al-Muyassara fi Fiqh al-Kitab al-Sunnah al-Mutahhara, volume 5, page 21, I believe it is. The Shaykh was asked, the student, I believe the student says that the Shaykh, one day, the Shaykh was sitting with one of the brothers from Al-Maghrib, from Morocco, who was speaking about excessive sittings between the suitors, between the man and the woman, and speaking and discussing, and So our Shaykh, he said, Shaykhana, our Shaykh, rahimahullah, Shaykh Albani, he said to the man, to show him that this is not good. He said to him, so how will you find out if she's loving? Are you going to ask her? He asked her, how are you going to find, Shaykh Albani asked the man, how are you going to find out if the woman is childbearing? Are you going to ask her, are you childbearing? And the man said, of course not. He said, rather I'm going to ask, or to look at her mother and her sister to see if they have children. The Shaykh rahimahullah then said, likewise, are you going to do the same thing when it comes to are you loving or not? And the man obviously said no. So the idea is, what's the point then of all these questions that are not necessary except in sittings? And this is something which unfortunately happens quite a bit, because some Muslims, they treat this sitting as if it's some sort of dating. It's not allowed. So what you come for the need, khalas, when it's done, it's done. So if someone didn't get a good look, you look again. And that's what ulama say, you could look more than once for a need, and same would apply for the sitting. But there's no mubalagha and there's no excessiveness. And this is the position of our ulama. It's important to understand this, because they say beyond that it's istimta', it's enjoyment, and it's not permissible. For example, some of the shaykh said sitting down every week, not allowed, or someone sitting all the time and just there, and if he's that comfortable with them and he finds that much good in her, or she finds that much good in him, they should just get married. Tayyib, going back now, if someone then may ask, okay, if we cannot sit so long and talk freely, how can I know the person then? What are the means available to me to get to know this person? Because obviously now if I can't sit down and excessively talk or ask questions, then we say there are two means. The ulama, they mention two ways to find out really who a person is. And this is the real work. This is the homework that happens after. And this is the real way to find out about somebody. And it needs to be done. Number one, asking about that person by talking to their relatives, their family members, co-workers, and friends. So it's important that the wali or the woman asks the wali to do it, or her brother, to go and find information about this man. Or the man will find information about the woman by asking her wali, or if he has a sister, to ask her sister, to ask her to find out. You got to do some investigation. The Permanent Committee, Lajnah Da'ima, in their fatwa number 18,452, the Permanent Committee said, the means to knowing the condition of someone are many and easy. From them are asking his relatives about him, his friends or co-workers at his work, examining the situation without being hasty. That's a key word. So the Permanent Committee offered the following ways. Asking relatives, and we're going to talk about later how it's, if someone asks you about someone else, you have to tell the truth. Number two, friends, and this is important. You find out who the person's friends are. You find out from their friends, who are they? What do they do with their free time? How do they spend their Friday nights, Saturday nights? What do they do with their money? Or what bad qualities do they have? Are they temperamental, etc.? Examining the situation too without being hasty. Tayyib, we'll talk more about this. That's number one. That's the hard part, to do the real digging. Because in reality, if you're only going to take what you heard in the meeting, the marriage meeting, the person told you maybe things you want to hear. And so you will have a false sense of who they are. And this is perhaps why there's sometimes a lot of letdown, because the person gave all the answers, the script, he read the script. And then the woman is confused, or the husband is confused. They said they do all these things, they said, and then what happened? They were not truthful. Next one is for the wedding now, to deeply examine the situation of the suitor. So this is for the woman. And the wedding will do the hard work. That's why he's there, to do the vetting. So Shaykh Uthaymin mentions beautifully Fatawa Nur ala Darb. He said, so like this, I view that it's obligatory to be eager in the search. An obligation which is emphasized. That the wali, the guardian of the woman, should examine in detail. And there is no harm if harm if the reply to the proposal is delayed. He has to examine in detail, the Sheikh says. It doesn't matter, he says, if you delay giving the response to the proposal 10 days later, 20 days later, or so, until the person has clear insight who this person is. If it becomes clear that the suitor is upon the desired description, the suitor is the one whose religion and character pleasing, then the wali should marry him to his daughter, or to the one he's wali for. And what we take from this is that the job of the wali is to vet, to really dig into the person. Where is he? How is his money? What does he do with his free time? To investigate on behalf of the woman, to get to details. That's why he's there. Because if the meeting is there, we said already what the objectives are, but if a man and woman just based on what they see only, they may be taken away by desire. And this is the reality. They could maybe like how each other look, or they might like their personality, and they may be misled to incline towards them unfairly or unduly. Attachment may occur even. So what's important for the wali to vet and take a very serious stock of the person. So thus, this is important. In Islam, excessive discussions between the two parties is not necessary because, number one, many ulama mentioned it arouses the desires. And this is the reality. They're still not married. Number two, it is not an accurate representation of who they are, since in this stage both parties may misrepresent one another. And that's why we know the narration authentic from Umar ibn Khattab radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, and many of us we heard it before, and Shaykh Al-Albani rahimahullah, he authenticated in Irwa al-Gharil, that Umar ibn Khattab asked one man, do you know another man? And he said yes. He said, how do you know him? And Umar gave some ways to know somebody, and this is important, the shahid. And one of those ways that he mentioned is that if you were a neighbor with them, a businessman, or traveled. So why would he mention these points? Because in reality, this is when you know somebody in the closest proximity. You know somebody through very close interactions. So for example, neighbor or businessman, or business with them, or you travel with them. And so the benefit we take from that narration is that to truly know somebody is beyond just talking to them. So we have to do both, all of it. طيب, inshallah, to wrap up the next points. So that's how someone can go about finding more information. And the same point, somebody may raise the question, and this is a point that we mentioned some classes ago. This method, the Islamic method of getting married, does it truly lead to successful marriages? And the answer is yes. Somebody might doubt this, and this is important to respond to such a doubt, and say that this is too informal or too formal of a process. You can't really get to know the person. Because the non-Muslims, they do a lot of dating and getting to know one another and even moving in together and all these things before they get married. So they have better representation of themselves or who they're getting married to. This is what people think. And that led to some Muslims to do dating, what they call halal dating, which doesn't exist in Islam. The problem is that there's studies on either side that show that getting to know someone or living extensively with somebody can either strengthen a marriage or divorce. There's studies that mention both. So as Muslims, how do we respond to this? Because somebody will say, well, it's a reasonable way to get to know. I have to know someone for a while. And the mushkila is that it doesn't really, like as you said, give you a true representation of the person, because after you get married, you truly find out who they were. All this flattery and good manners and stuff will go away. You'll see the person for who they are. So Islamically, you respond to them by saying, number one, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when he told us to see the woman, or a woman seeing the man, this actually leads a person to compatibility and marriage. I remind everybody the hadith Anas ibn Malik, when Mughir ibn Shu'bah went to look at the woman, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, or radiyallahu ta'ala anha, after he saw her and they got married, because the Rasul said, "Idhab fandur ilayha," go and see her, فَإِنَّهُ أَحْرَى أَنْ يُؤْدَمَ بَيْنَكُمَا, because it is more likely that it will generate love between you two. He says, فَفَعَلَ, I did this. I want everyone to pay attention. He did what the Rasul said, not what he didn't say. He didn't do something haram. فَفَعَلَ, he did it. فَتَزَوَّجَهَا, and he married her. فَذَكَرَ مِنْ مُوَافَقَتِهَا, and he found then that they were compatible. they got along. That's when the Sunnah of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. If you follow the Sunnah, Allah will barakah. And this is one of the things that many of us we need to be reminded of. You do the haram, you're losing barakah. You can't tell us, no one can tell themselves, I'll do the haram way, inshallah it'll work. You start with haram, you end in haram. This is how we know. Whatever is built in haram, itself will become haram. But what if someone started disobedience of Allah? How could they tell themselves, I'm doing it the Islamic way? Number 2, there's a narration from Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala anhu, authentic, where he says that love is from Allah and discord is from shaitan. If someone were to say, okay, we'll do what the non-Muslims do, dating, and love doesn't come from these ways. Love comes from Allah. Allah puts in the hearts of the people. وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً. Allah puts between them, in their hearts, love and mercy. If you do it the way the Rasul taught us, the Islamic way, you will engender the love that you want. That's very important because it comes from Allah. As for discord, that's from shaitan in general. So ask Allah to bless the union and to make you follow the way of Islam to do it. You shouldn't say, if I do the Islamic way, I won't know. You won't know either way. Especially if you do the haram, you can't even guarantee that what you're doing here is going to benefit you. In fact, you can say that this is the wrong way. Thirdly, we know in Islam that if someone gets married, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we said one of the objectives of the marriage is that love Allah puts between a man and wife, the mercy and affection. Ibn Hazm, he writes in The Ring of the Dove that it's possible, as we said before a couple weeks ago, that someone falls in love with someone before, by just seeing them. It's also possible, he says, someone loves someone after long interaction with them. And his opinion, Hazm rahimahullah, was he favored the second view, that getting to love someone after long interaction with them is a stronger and more realistic form, not so much to love at first sight, even though he accepted the idea of it. And this is important. Why? Because if someone said, I don't know the person, and does it negate that you're not going to end up knowing them and liking them? And this is one of the things we have to dispel these ideas from our mind that have been polluted in our Western culture, has polluted our mind, that we think, I have to know someone, I have to do all the haram before. And then what happens? We don't end up happy. But if Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam told us, and there's a hadith, we'll cite the full one later, that the sign of a blessed marriage is easy khitbah, the easy, smooth khitbah, smooth process, smooth proposal, a smooth process and procedure. So if someone wants to find out if they're in the right direction, that's one of them. And I'm going to mention a few points left in today's lesson, which is 3.9. What do you do after proposal? So after proposal, you don't make a decision yet. That's number 1. You don't. You have to wait. Take your time. So a woman doesn't haste. A man doesn't haste. And we said, the hadith you cited a second ago, I believe it's in Muslim, Ahmed and others, I've got to find the original text, that a sign of a good marriage, or a sign of a good proposal, is that it's easy. It's very important. A sign of a good woman, especially for the man, he can look, and also it's something that's easy. Allah made it easy for them. So that's something good. But what should you do when the proposal is done and the marriage meeting has ended? Now it's time for the woman to pray istikhara, and also the man can pray istikhara as well. And this is proven by the hadith Sahih Muslim, hadith number 1428. On the authority of Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, that when the iddah of Zaynab radiyallahu ta'ala anha ended, Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam told Zayd to mention her, I mention him to her. So Zayd went on until he came to her and she was fermenting some flour. Right? She was preparing some flour. And Zayd said, I saw her and I felt in my heart an idea of greatness, so much so that I could not see towards her. By the simple fact that I knew Allah's Messenger ﷺ had made mention of her. SubhanAllah, he had so much haya of her, out of love for Rasulullah ﷺ, that Rasulullah mentioned her, he felt so shy, I couldn't even look at her, he said, because Rasulullah didn't want to marry her. Look at the Sahaba, how much haya, how much love they have for Rasulullah ﷺ. So he said, I turned my back towards her, and I turned upon my heels, and I said, Zaynab, Allah's Messenger ﷺ has sent me with a message to you. She said, I do not do anything until I solicit or I speak or consult my Lord. So she stood at her place and she worshipped. Allah Mubarak. Look at the religiosity of the mother of the believers. Radiyallahu ta'ala anha. That's Zainab radiallahu ta'ala. Look at this. As soon as she got this, she told him, I'm not going to respond until first I consult my Lord. Subhanallah. ما أنا بصانعة شيئا حتى أوامر ربي. فقامت إلى مسجدها. She stood in her place where she usually prays, and she prayed until the end of the narration. Hadith Sahih Muslim. From this hadith, the benefit, Imam An-Nasa'i, rahimahullah, in his Sunan, he writes, chapter, a woman doing istikhara if she receives a proposal of marriage. So there's a benefit for the sisters, and also you can send inshallah for the brothers. And when you receive a proposal, before you accept, you do istikhara. Istikhara. And we'll mention in a minute, istikhara or istishara, which one comes first. But there's a benefit. You don't just answer immediately. You do the istikhara, ask Allah. And Hafiz ibn Hajar writes in Fath al-Bari, volume 10, page 504, that in this hadith, is the recommendation for a woman to pray istikhara and making supplication to Allah when she's proposed to before responding, before she responds. So this is an important step that cannot be missed. Ask Allah to guide you to that which is better. Ask Allah to make it work. Ask Allah to allow you to marry the person who's good for you. Whoever seeks Allah's counsel has always been successful. It's very important these steps to be taken into consideration, because we said this is the way a person is going to get married for Allah's sake. Wadih? Next, the question comes, al-istishara is consultation. Here, this hadith, we learn that istikhara, seeking Allah's counsel, comes before al-istishara, seeking the counsel of people. When ulama, they differed. Does istikhara come first or istishara? What's istishara? When you ask other people, what do you think? Should I buy this business? Should I go here? Should I marry this person? You ask people. So you ask Allah first or you ask the people? The ulama, they have slight difference. But most of them, or not most, some of them, they say they do istikhara first based on this hadith. Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah said, the scholars are different. Does his seeking counsel precede istikhara? Yani istishara? He said no, what's correct is istikhara first. Istikhara proceeds due to the statement of Rasulullah when one of you contemplates entering upon a particular task or endeavor, let them first perform 2 rakats of an optional prayer until the end of the hadith. This is Sharh Riyadh Salihin, volume 1, page 792. Also, Shaykh Yahya al-Hajuri Abdullah also was asked a question, I believe Kanz al-Thameen, which was asked, istikhara comes first or istishara? And he says, whichever he proceeds with, then there's no harm. However, what is more deserving is to proceed with istikhara. But if someone did istishara first, no problem. For example, they asked their friends, close friends and family, what do you think? And they give an answer, then they ask Allah to put khair in it and go forward. So very important, istikhara and istishara going. So in this, we'll go with istikhara. We'll go in this order because of the hadith Zainab and also the hadith in Bukhari. After you do istikhara, now you do the istishara. And what is that? You go and ask, like we said before, relatives, close friends and family, co-workers, whoever you can know, especially close people, about that person's character and the deen and the insides. Because, as some of the ulama, they mentioned, I believe it was Ibn al-Jawzi, rahimahullah, that when it comes to the akhlaq, that's the part that's hidden. The other one's apparent, the deen, you can see some parts of it, even though the true reality only Allah knows. And those who are close to the person can really tell how they are. But when it comes to the character, this is hidden. We can't tell. Someone will, mashallah, behave nicely or look good in the beginning, but you don't know if they have any problems or anything they're dealing with. Which comes to another issue, is self-disclosure necessary? Are we allowed to hide very important things? We're going to get to that in a second. And what's the proof you're allowed to do istishara in the first place for marriage? Hadith I already mentioned before and last week, Fatima bint Qais, radiallahu ta'ala anha. When Rasulullah came to Rasulullah, she said, Muawiyah and Abu Jahm, may Allah please both of them, send me a proposal of marriage. Rasulullah said, Muawiyah is destitute, he has no property, and Abu Jahm is very difficult on the women. Until the end of the hadith. The Nabi ﷺ, when she asked, he gave her some criticisms and a position where it's allowed to mention some defects of people. He's a great noble Sahaba, but he had to mention this ﷺ, because in this position, he's a must to tell the truth and to be clear. Sahih Bukhari, Muslim. You see, one of the problems of our community nowadays is that if a man is asked by another man or about a woman about somebody he knows, he'll lie to protect his brother. And that's haram in Islam. It's haram and haram. If someone asks you, is this brother good? What do you know? And you say, oh, he's mashallah. and you know the person is not good. Haram and haram. Na'udhu billah min dhalik. This is one of the problems, perhaps, why we have this problem in our community, of some people being duped, because we're not helping one another. وَتَعَاوَنَ الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى. Cooperating good and piety. Imam Nawawi, when he comments in the hadith, he says, in this hadith, وفيه دليل على جواز ذكر الإنسان بما فيه عند المشاورة وطلب النصيحة ولا يكون هذا من غيبة المحرمة بل من نصيحة الواجبة. Beautiful. He says, in this is evidence. It's evidence for the permissibility of mentioning when someone's seeking counsel from you, that which a person has of characteristics. And when someone seeks nasiha from you, that it's not considered a prohibited ghiba, rather it's nasiha, advice which is wajib. And the ulama have mentioned that in 6 situations, it's permissible to backbite someone, and I believe we covered this in our study of Kitab al-Adhkar al-Adhkar of Imam al-Nawawi was-Suyuti. So this is important. You're allowed to tell the truth as it is. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam did it. And Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, we know, is the most righteous of all people. So the responsibility of the person, when they asked about another person, comes that you cannot lie. You have to be trustworthy. Hadith Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, reported in Tirmidhi, it's a hadith sahih, قال عليه الصلاة والسلام المستشار مؤتمن. The one whose counsel is sought is entrusted. المستشار مؤتمن. The one whose counsel is sought is entrusted. So here is very clear evidence. If someone to say, brother, I want to marry so-and-so woman, what do you know about her? For example, let's say it's your relative. You can't lie if you know something about her. Same, a brother asks another brother, or when he comes to you and says, I want to marry my daughter off to Fulan, what do you think? You have to say what would you know. But how do you say it is the question too. So the ulama, interestingly, they mention, like Ibn Hajar al-Haytami al-Mughni al-Muhtaj, and I believe Imam Nawawi Rawd al-Talibin, that there's ways to go about it. You don't have to be so detailed if it's allowed to say something general. For example, some of the ulama recommend saying, I wouldn't deal with so-and-so if I was you. And it's something like that, it's yakfi, sufficient. Because it gives the impression somebody's got something that's not beneficial. So, for example, you keep it general unless details know. Like somebody say, what do you mean? And if you have to say, you have to say, okay, so brother, so-and-so does this and this. It's not ghiba. We have to get around this point, because what's happening in our community maybe is that we do ghiba, which is haram, and the ghiba is halal, we don't do. Allah musta'an. Maybe we do the ghiba, which is haram, we do it, and the one that's halal, we hide from it. La ilaha illallah. It's not correct. We have to be honest. قولوا قولا سديدا. Say a straight word. So if you can be general and it's sufficient, or you have to be detailed, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was detailed. So you have to say what you have to say. And that also leads to another point. What if somebody has qualities which qualities can I reveal? So the ulama some of them divide into 2 types. Qualities which is going to make the marriage break. It's going to end up with the woman having khiyar, choice to leave the marriage or stay. For example, the person had a very sick, big sickness that they need to disclose, and they didn't disclose it, and I knew it. That kind of information has to be disclosed, because then the woman, if she knew beforehand, she might not take the offer. So that kind of information versus, let's say someone is doing a sin, it doesn't affect the validity of the marriage, or like her choice to leave. It's something bad. Some ulama say it depends. You don't have to mention something if you can make tawbah from it and move on. So if it's something you know that the person can make tawbah from it, that he can fix it, and is trying to fix it, and it's not going to affect, then some mention you don't have to say it. But it's something big or something that they need to know, like this person has an anger issue, this person has they have financial issues. You can't hide this kind of stuff. And that's why there's more details, but we don't have time to get more to that. Next point. So now you did the istikhara, you did the istishara. Number 3, now a person should take their time. Do not rush in answering the proposal. Imam Ibn Jawzi writes in Sayyid al-Qaadir, the Capture Thoughts, page 148 of the English. Having said that, it is better if a person can wait for some time before finalizing a marriage. Alright, he writes, it's important. Having said that, it's better if a person can wait for some time before finalizing the marriage. Why? He continues to say, in order to test the longing of his heart for her, if it's a man, because as every intelligent person knows, the self longs, the soul, it longs and yearns for a matter, either because it is untried or because of love. This is important. He wants to check himself. Does he really want to marry this person? How is his heart? So if he says, if it's a latter type, that he finds that he loves this person, or he's attracted to them, to her, he should proceed, so as long as he's sure that his yearning is for her because of love. Yani usually, this is actually a good human psychological benefit. In human nature, when something is new, it's exciting. It's very important to know this. He said, the heart young yearns for something either because it's untried, and it's new to us, or because we love it. So in the beginning, you could be like, okay, I'm going to marry her because you're just excited. You're just excited about the idea of it. And later on, you realize, okay, I wasn't. See, this is very important. These advice are golden. These are ulama are telling us this, guys. Today, unfortunately, we don't solicit. Many people don't solicit advice to Ahlul Ilm. And they seek the advice to those people who are not Ahlul Ilm. And then they wonder why things went wrong. Ahlul Ilm, they're not just people who give ahkam. They have beautiful advice from khibra wa ilm. That's the difference. Khibra is its own category, but ilm wa khibra, you can't beat this. So when they tell us things like this is very important, and Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah mentioned the same we said earlier, it takes 10 or 20 days, whatever it may be. Take your time to make sure you're making the right choice. You got to do the homework, and that's important to be not hasty. Al-ajlatu min ash-shaytan al-hadith. Okay, last point, 3.10 for today. And 3.10 now. How to accept or reject. That's the last one. What do you do now if you made a decision? How do you reject? How do you accept? The ulama, they mention that the person, like the woman or the suitor, doesn't want to marry this person. They made the decision. They say, interestingly, some of the ulama say it's not befitting that he says, I don't want to marry her. Because that's going to hurt her feelings. SubhanAllah, look at Islam, how it considers people's feelings. It's not befitting, they say that I don't want to marry her. Because what is he implying? Something wrong with her looks, maybe, or he doesn't like her deen. It's not befitting. Maybe he would say it and it would take the wrong meaning. So the ulama, they advise many of them, or some of them, not to say anything. The husband or the person keeps quiet, and after a while they get the message, okay, they're not interested because they didn't respond. They'll get back to you if they are interested. Otherwise, they're not. And why did the ulama mention that? Imam Nawawi rolled the talibin. Why? Because the hadith Sahih ibn Sa'id in Sahih Bukhari, that when a woman came to Rasulullah and proposed herself to him, alayhi Allah's Messenger came, or she said, I came to you, O Messenger of Allah, to offer myself to you in marriage without mahar. Nabi looked at her, and he looked at her carefully and fixed his glance on her. And then he lowered his head. When the lady saw, the sahabiya, she saw that he didn't say anything, she sat down. She knew he wasn't interested. What's the benefit from this hadith? Hadith Bukhari. Nabi sallallahu when she came, he looked at her, and he looked at her up and down. And some of the ulama said this is dalil that a person can look at the woman, and it is not restricted to face the hands, as we mentioned before. This is one of the evidence they use. What does the hadith say? Rasulullah saw her when she came. فَسَعَّدَ النَّظَرَ إِلَيْهَا وَسَوَّبَهُ. He looked her up and down, literally. And then after that, he lowered his head. Shaykh Muhammad Adam Ethiopian, in Sharh of An-Nasa'i, Surah An-Nasa'i, he mentions some fawaid from this hadith. And one of those is that he explained why the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam did answer. That's why some scholars say just to keep quiet is the better way. And some of the things that they mentioned was that Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he looked at her because he was interested in marriage, or that she was someone who he found attractive to marry, but because of perhaps the situation, or because he has already enough wives, he didn't get married. And so, I'm just summarizing what the Shaykh said because of the time. He said at the end, he could have also kept quiet out of a lot of haya, because Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had a lot of haya. Right? So at the end, this is what the ulama mentioned. If someone wants to give the answer, reply, they give it in a nice way. Right? You can send the wali or someone to say that they're not interested in a nice way. Or they get the message that she's not interested because she's looking at others to marry. And I like this. But because of the time, inshallah, we'll end with this much. And next week we'll talk about the next stage after the meeting. If the person does accept, the next meeting, the next part of the process is the mahar, dowry, and the shurut of the nikah. Inshallah, if anyone has any questions, we'll take them now. Otherwise, we'll end with this much. Anyone has any questions? طيب inshallah we'll end with this much then. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.